The persistent rhythm of rain against the thin windows of the Nickerson Gardens housing project in Watts, Los Angeles, matched the beat Marcus Jenkins was creating on his second-hand laptop. At 22, his small bedroom doubled as a makeshift studio, with acoustic foam panels haphazardly taped to the walls and a microphone stand fashioned from PVC pipe. Outside, police sirens wailed in the distance, a soundtrack as familiar to Marcus as his own heartbeat. "Yo, that's fire," said Darnell, Marcus's childhood friend, bobbing his head to the track. "For real, you keep making beats like this, and we're gonna blow up." Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. They'd been saying the same thing for years, yet they remained unknown, uploading tracks to SoundCloud that barely hit triple-digit plays. Meanwhile, the violence in their neighborhood had claimed 3 of their friends in the past year alone. "My cousin said he could get us studio time next weekend," Darnell continued, scrolling through his phone. "His boy owes him a favor." "I got rent due," Marcus replied, adjusting a slider on his mixing program. "Gotta pick up extra shifts at the warehouse." His mother, Loretta, appeared in the doorway, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from her double shift. Despite the exhaustion etched into her face, her eyes softened at the sight of her son. "You still up with that music?" she asked, her tone a mixture of concern and pride. "Just finishing up, Ma," Marcus replied, lowering the volume out of respect. "Mrs. Wallace from 3B asked if you could help move her daughter's furniture tomorrow. Said she'd pay you $50. Marcus nodded. Every extra dollar counted in their household. His younger sister, Keisha, was starting community college in the fall, the first in their family to pursue higher education. Between his warehouse job, odd jobs for neighbors, and his mother's nursing assistant position, they were just keeping their heads above water. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, Marcus put on his headphones and pulled up the email draft he'd been working on for weeks. It was addressed to Aftermath Studios, where his idol Dr. Dre had discovered countless talents. The email contained links to his best beats and a heartfelt explanation of his passion for music production. His finger hovered over the send button, as it had many nights before, but fear kept him from pressing it. Instead, he opened a new browser tab and searched for production courses at Los Angeles City College. If he saved enough from his warehouse job, he might be able to afford one class next semester. It wasn't Aftermath Studios, but it was a step toward legitimacy, toward turning his passion into something his mother could see as more than just a hobby. The next morning, Marcus helped Mrs. Wallace move furniture as promised. As he was leaving her apartment, his phone buzzed with a text from Darnell. "Check IG right now. Snoop's looking for new producers for his label." Marcus's heart raced as he pulled up Instagram. Sure enough, Snoop Dogg had posted an open call for up-and-coming producers to submit their best work for a chance to participate in a development program with his Death Row Records label, recently reacquired by the legendary rapper. The deadline was in 2 weeks. Marcus stared at the post, a familiar mixture of hope and doubt swirling in his chest. This could be his shot, but the competition would be fierce, and he'd been disappointed before. Back in his room, Marcus sat at his laptop and began working on a new beat, something that would showcase his unique style while paying homage to the West Coast sound Snoop had helped pioneer. Hours turned into days as he crafted what he hoped would be his ticket out of Nickerson Gardens, his chance to build a better life for his family. 1 week before the submission deadline, disaster struck. Marcus returned home from his warehouse shift to find their apartment had been broken into. His laptop, containing all his music, including the nearly completed submission for Snoop's contest, was gone. Loretta held him as he broke down. "It's just a computer," she whispered, though they both knew it was much more. "All my work, Ma," Marcus choked out. "Everything I've been working on for years." That night, unable to sleep, Marcus walked the streets of his neighborhood, passing familiar corners where he'd grown up, where friends had died, where dreams seemed to expire before they could take flight. He ended up at the community center, where he'd first fallen in love with music, peering through the window at the now dark room where volunteers once taught kids basic music production. "Place closes at 9, young blood," came a deep voice behind him. Marcus turned to find Mr. Henderson, the center's longtime director, locking up for the night. "Just walking," Marcus mumbled. Mr. Henderson studied him. "You're Loretta's boy, right? The one always making those beats?" Marcus nodded. "Heard about what happened. That's rough," Mr. Henderson said. "Come by tomorrow morning. Got something that might help." The next day, Marcus arrived at the community center to find Mr. Henderson waiting with an older model laptop. It's not fancy, but it works. Center got a donation of new computers last month. Was gonna sell this one, but sounds like you need it more. Marcus stared in disbelief. I can't. You can and you will, Mr. Henderson interrupted. Community means looking out for each other. Besides, I remember when you were just a skinny kid in our music program. Always stayed late, always helped the younger ones. Consider this payback. With only 6 days until the deadline, Marcus started from scratch. He worked through nights, taking catnaps during the day, and calling in sick to his warehouse job. The beat he created was raw, emotional, a testament to his journey and the community that had shaped him. On the final day, trembling hands, Marcus uploaded his submission to the contest portal and pressed send. Whether or not Snoop ever heard it, he had created something that represented his truth. For now, that had to be enough. 3 weeks had passed since the submission deadline, and Marcus had heard nothing. Life had returned to its familiar rhythm. Warehouse shifts, helping his sister prepare for college, and rebuilding his music. Library on the borrowed laptop. He tried not to think about the contest, focusing instead on a new plan to take night classes while working days. It was a Tuesday afternoon when his phone rang with an unknown Los Angeles number. Normally, Marcus would let it go to voicemail. Too many bill collectors used unknown numbers. But something made him answer. Is this Marcus Jenkins? Asked a woman's professional voice. Yeah, who's this? Marcus replied, shifting a heavy box onto a pallet at the warehouse. This is Alicia Thompson from Death Row Records. I'm calling about your submission to our producer search. Marcus froze. The warehouse around him suddenly silent, though forklifts continued to beep and workers shouted across the floor. Your track caught Snoop's attention, and we'd like to invite you to a meeting at our studio this Friday. Marcus's supervisor was eyeing him from across the warehouse. This Friday? At 3 p.m., we'll email you the details. Can you make it? Could he make it? He'd crawl there if necessary. Yes, ma'am. I'll be there. After confirming his email address, Marcus hung up and stared at his phone in disbelief. His supervisor was now walking toward him, looking annoyed at the interruption of work. Jenkins, personal calls on break time only, he barked. Sorry, sir, Marcus replied automatically, his mind racing. He needed Friday off, but he'd already called in sick when remaking his submission. Asking for another day could cost him his job, a job his family depended on. That night, Marcus shared the news with his mother and sister over dinner, their small kitchen table wobbling as Keisha jumped up to hug him. Death Row Records? The Death Row? Keisha exclaimed. The same. Label as Tupac? It's just a meeting, Marcus cautioned, though he couldn't keep the excitement from his voice. Probably lots of producers got called. Loretta studied her son's face. When's this meeting? Friday afternoon, Marcus admitted reluctantly. You asking for time off? Marcus hesitated. I'm gonna try, but Collins is already on my back, about last week. Loretta was quiet for a moment, then stood and reached for her purse. She pulled out a small envelope and handed it to Marcus. Inside was $200 in cash. Ma, what? Mrs. Wallace's daughter gave me a tip for helping with her mother. Said you did good work moving her things. Loretta's eyes were firm. You go to that meeting. If Collins gives you trouble, you walk. We'll figure it out. I can't risk the job, Ma, not with Keisha's tuition. Marcus Jenkins, Loretta interrupted, her voice steady. I've watched you work on your music since you were 14 years old. Through gunshots outside our window, through losing your friends, through everything. This is your shot. You take it. Friday morning came, and Marcus stood before his supervisor's desk, requesting the afternoon off for a family emergency. Collins denied it, as expected, making it clear that leaving would mean termination. With his mother's words echoing in his mind, Marcus placed his warehouse ID on the desk and walked out. Hours later, freshly showered and wearing his best clothes, dark jeans and a button-up shirt Keisha had ironed 3 times, Marcus stood outside the sleek building that housed Death Row Records. The security guard checked his ID against a list and directed him to the 11th floor. In the elevator, Marcus tried to steady his breathing. What if this was all a mistake? What if they'd meant to call someone else? What if... The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area with Death Row Records displayed in bold letters on the wall. A receptionist greeted him and asked him to wait, informing him that the meeting was running slightly behind schedule. 20 minutes later, Alicia Thompson, a stylishly dressed woman in her 30s, appeared and led Marcus down a hallway lined with platinum records and iconic album covers. "We had over 5,000 submissions," she explained as they walked. "Snoop personally listened to the top 50 selections. Yours made quite an impression." Before Marcus could process this information, Alicia opened a door to a studio lounge where 3 people were engaged in conversation. Marcus recognized 2 immediately: Snoop Dogg himself and Dee Brown, a successful producer who'd worked with everyone from Kendrick Lamar to Rihanna. The third was a younger man Marcus didn't know. Snoop turned as they entered, his lanky frame unfolding as he stood. "This the young blood with that track?" he asked, his voice exactly as it sounded in interviews. "Yes, this is Marcus Jenkins," Alicia confirmed. Snoop extended his hand. "That beat was dope, nephew. Had that old school feel but with some new shit I ain't heard before." Marcus shook Snoop's hand, somehow finding his voice. "Thank you, sir. It's an honor." "Sir?" Snoop laughed. "Nah, none of that. Just Snoop." The meeting that followed was surreal. They played Marcus's track through the studio's high-end sound system, and Dee Brown asked detailed questions about his production techniques. The younger man, who Marcus learned was Jordan, Snoop's A&R director, took notes. "So here's what we're thinking," Snoop said finally, leaning forward. "We got this new program, taking 10 producers, getting them mentorship, studio time, networking, 3-month program, small stipend. At the end, we sign at least one to a development deal." Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. "And you want me in the program?" "If you want in," Snoop confirmed. "It's competitive, hard work, but real opportunity for those who take it serious." "When would it start?" Marcus asked, thinking of his now non-existent job, his rent, his sister's tuition. 2 weeks, Jordan said. "Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, stipends $2,000 a month, not getting rich, but enough to focus full-time." $2,000 a month was less than his warehouse job, but it was something. And this was the chance he'd been dreaming of his entire life. "I'm in," Marcus said without hesitation. Snoop nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "That's what I like to hear. Hunger. Now let's see what you got beyond that one track." For the next hour, Marcus played them more of his work from his phone's cloud backup, explaining his influences and vision. By the time he left the building, contract in hand to review over the weekend, the sun was setting over Los Angeles, casting the city in a golden glow that seemed to mirror the opportunity now before him. On the bus ride home, Marcus called his mother. "I got in, Ma," he said, his voice catching. "It's real." Loretta's happy tears came through the phone. "I knew it, baby. I always knew it." That night, as news spread through their building, neighbors stopped by to congratulate him. Mrs. Wallace brought a cake. Darnell arrived with their other friends, everyone crowding into the small apartment to celebrate. In the midst of the impromptu party, Marcus stepped out onto the narrow balcony for a moment alone. Below, Nickerson Gardens sprawled in the darkness, the place that had both formed him and threatened to trap him. Now, he had a chance to rise above it, not to escape, but to represent it on his own terms. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Welcome to the family. Get ready. To work. SD." Marcus looked up at the night sky, barely visible through the city's light pollution, and allowed himself to feel something he'd guarded against for years. Hope. The Death Row Records building became Marcus's second home. Each morning, he arrived early, often the first of the 10 selected producers to reach the 11th floor. The program was structured like a music production boot camp. Workshops with industry professionals in the mornings, practical studio time in the afternoons, and weekly evaluations from Snoop's team. Marcus quickly bonded with 2 other participants: Tiana, a 25-year-old DJ from Chicago whose electronic beats had a distinctive soul influence, and Raphael, a classically trained pianist from Miami who taught himself production while working nights at a hotel. Others in the program came from more privileged backgrounds: private school educations, parents in the industry, formal music training. One participant, Kyle, arrived each day in designer clothes and drove a BMW. His father was a record executive at a rival label, a fact he mentioned frequently. "My pops says these development programs are just cheap labor for the labels," Kyle commented during their second week, loud enough for everyone to hear. "We make beats, they own them, and most of us never get signed." "Then why are you here?" Tiana challenged. Kyle shrugged. "Networking, plus Snoop's a legend." Marcus stayed out of these exchanges, keeping his head down and focusing on the opportunity before him. During their first monthly evaluation, D. Brown praised Marcus's work ethic, but challenged him to expand his sound. "You got skills, no doubt," the veteran producer said, "but I'm not hearing enough range. Your beats are fire for certain types of artists, but can you produce for a female vocalist? For someone doing more melodic rap? You need versatility to survive in this business." The criticism stung, but Marcus knew it was valid. That weekend, instead of going home to Nickerson Gardens, he stayed at the studio, experimenting with different tempos, instruments, and arrangements. By Monday, he had created 3 new beats that showcased a broader range. D. Brown listened and nodded approvingly. "Now we're talking." As the weeks passed, Marcus's confidence grew. His stipend covered the basics, and with his mother picking up extra shifts, they managed to keep Keisha in her college classes. Marcus visited home on Sundays, bringing his laundry and updates about the program. The walls of their apartment now featured a framed copy of his death row contract, prominently displayed in the living room. Halfway through the program, Snoop announced a special challenge. Each producer would create a track for one of Death Row's signed artists. The artists would select their favorites, and those producers would get to collaborate on upcoming releases, valuable credits for their portfolios. Marcus was assigned to produce for Venus, a rising R&B singer known for her emotional lyrics and powerful voice. Creating the perfect beat for her became his obsession. He studied her previous work, noting her vocal range and the themes she explored. He created melody after melody, scrapping anything that didn't feel worthy. 3 days before the deadline, still unsatisfied with his work, Marcus fell asleep at his workstation. He dreamed of his old neighborhood, not of the violence or hardship, but of the block parties, the church choirs, the sounds of life that formed his earliest musical memories. He woke with a clear vision for Venus's track, something that blended classic soul samples with modern production, creating space for her voice while providing a foundation sturdy enough to support her emotional range. When the day came for the artists to select their beats, Marcus watched nervously as Venus listened to each submission with closed eyes and headphones. When his track played, her eyebrows raised slightly, and her foot began tapping unconsciously. After hearing all 10 submissions, Venus didn't hesitate. "Number 4, she said, pointing to Marcus's station. "That's the one. Got soul." The victory earned Marcus his first professional credit, and something even more valuable: Snoop's personal attention. The following week, the legendary rapper invited Marcus to a private session where he was working on material for his own upcoming project. "Heard what you did for Venus," Snoop said as Marcus settled in. "Wanted to see what you might cook up for the dog." Working side by side with his idol, Marcus found himself surprisingly calm. Music had always been his clearest language, and in the studio environment, his instincts took over. By the end of the session, they had the foundation for 2 potential tracks, and Snoop seemed genuinely impressed. "You got good ears, nephew," he said as they wrapped up. "But more important, you got good sense about when to talk and when to listen. Rare quality." As the 3-month program neared its end, tension mounted among the participants. Only 1 or 2 would likely receive development deals, with the others getting reference letters and portfolio material. Valuable, but not the golden ticket they all coveted. The final challenge was announced with 2 weeks remaining. Create an original EP concept with 3 fully produced tracks, artwork ideas, and marketing angles. This would serve as their final submission, the culmination of everything they'd learned. Marcus threw himself into the project, drawing inspiration from his journey from Nickerson Gardens to Death Row. He titled his EP Basement to Boardroom, and crafted 3 tracks that told his story while showcasing the range D. Brown had pushed him to develop. The night before submissions were due, disaster struck again. A power surge in the building corrupted Marcus's files, and despite the IT team's efforts, one of his 3 tracks was irretrievably lost. With less than 24 hours remaining, Marcus faced a crucial decision: submit an incomplete EP or stay up all night trying to recreate the lost track. He chose the latter, calling Tiana and Raphael for moral support. They arrived with coffee and determination, helping him piece together parts of the track from earlier saved versions and offering feedback as he reworked sections from scratch. By morning, bleary-eyed and exhausted, Marcus had reconstructed the track. It wasn't identical to the original. In some ways, it was better, refined through the pressure of the moment. His friends left for their own final preparations, and Marcus put the finishing touches on his submission. The evaluation process took a full week. Each participant presented their EP to a panel that included Snoop, D. Brown, and several death row executives. Questions were pointed, feedback brutally honest. When it was Marcus's turn, he spoke from the heart about his concept, his background, and his vision as a producer. "Last question," Snoop said after the formal evaluation concluded. "Why you? With all the talent in this room, why should Death Row bet on Marcus Jenkins?" Marcus took a deep breath. "Because music saved my life, and I want to create that same opportunity for others. Because I understand both the streets and the studio, and can bridge those worlds. Because I've never had anything handed to me, so I work twice as hard for everything I get." He paused. "And because I'm just getting started." The panel's faces remained impassive, but as Marcus left the room, D. Brown gave him a subtle nod of respect. The final day arrived. All 10 participants gathered in the main conference room, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. Jordan, the A&R director, thanked everyone for their participation before turning the floor over to Snoop. "Proud of all y'all," Snoop began, surveying the room. "For real. Watching you grow these past months has been dope. Some of you came in with advantages, connections, training, resources. Others came with nothing but raw talent and hunger." He paused, making eye contact with each person. "Today, we're offering development deals to 2 of you." The room held its collective breath. "Tiana Washington," Snoop announced. Tiana gasped, tears immediately springing to her eyes as the room erupted in applause. When the noise settled, Snoop continued. "And our second offer goes to—" Marcus closed his eyes, his mother's face appearing in his mind. Whatever happened, he had come further than most from his neighborhood ever would. That had to be enough. Marcus Jenkins. For a moment, Marcus didn't move, didn't breathe. Had he imagined it? But then Raphael was hugging him, and Tiana was pulling him to his feet, and Snoop was extending his hand across the table. "Welcome to Death Row for real, nephew," Snoop said, his signature grin spreading across his face. "Now the real work begins." 1 year later, Marcus sat in Studio C at Death Row Records, making final adjustments to a track that would appear on Snoop's upcoming album. His development deal had blossomed into a staff producer position, with credits on 4 released singles, 2 of which had charted on Billboard's Hot 100. His workspace was now personalized. A framed photo of his family, a small plant Keisha had given him to liven up that sterile studio, she'd said, and his first platinum plaque for his work on Venus's breakthrough single. Life had changed dramatically. He'd moved his family out of Nickerson Gardens into a modest but comfortable apartment in a safer neighborhood. Keisha had transferred to UCLA with a partial scholarship, studying music business administration. His mother had reduced her hours, at the hospital, finally taking weekends off after 20 years of constant work. Yet some things remained the same. Marcus still wore the same watch his father had given him before passing away. He still spent Sundays with his family. And he still carried the hunger that had driven him from the start, never taking his position for granted. A knock at the studio door interrupted his thoughts. It was Jordan, now a close colleague. "Meeting in 5, he reminded Marcus. "The community center proposal." Marcus nodded, saving his work before heading to the conference room where Snoop and several executives were already gathered. On the table lay architectural renderings of a rebuilt Watts Community Center. Same center where Mr. Henderson had once given Marcus a second-hand laptop that changed his life. The Death Row Foundation, the label's charitable arm, had committed to renovating the aging facility and expanding its music program. Marcus